Jace Maddox had always preferred machines to people. Out here, tucked deep in the shadows of Asteroid Outpost F9, machines didn't lie. They didn't flatter. They didn't backstab. They just broke, and he fixed them. Life was simple, even if the credits came slow. He'd served his time in the Earth Coalition's warfronts, seen what both humans and aliens were capable of. He didn't expect much from anyone anymore. So when a 7-foot-tall insectoid wearing Royal Valari armor strutted into his hangar like it owned the vacuum, Jace knew trouble had finally found him again. "You are Jace Maddox," the creature said. Its voice translated with a sterile tone through a chest-mounted box. "The king has selected you." "I don't do politics," Jace muttered, not looking up from the drone core he was refurbishing. "It is not a request." The payment chip hit the floor with a sharp clink. Jace picked it up and scanned the encoded amount. His brow twitched. That was 5 years of food and ship parts, no questions asked. "Fine," he said, standing. "What kind of ship is it?" The envoy's antennae twitched. "Not a ship. A living transport. It requires stabilization." "Organic tech?" Jace frowned. "Not my specialty. Human logic processing is unique. Your perspective is beneficial." 2 hours later, a containment pod the size of a shuttle descended into the hangar, guided by 3 Valari guards. The outer shell hissed open, revealing not a ship, not a bioengineered slug cruiser, not even a symbiotic life-form transport. It was a wolf. Pale, ghostly white. Thick, matted fur. Lean muscle underskin marbled with strange, glowing veins. Its eyes were closed, but even unconscious, the thing radiated danger. A collar of restraint tech hummed faintly, and occasional spasms shook its limbs as if reacting to an invisible enemy. "You brought me a sick dog?" Jace snapped. "Contained within is an unstable biological transport vessel," the envoy corrected. "Its neural framework requires alignment. Your methods will suffice. You have 3 standard cycles. That's not enough time for diagnostics, let alone repairs. You accepted payment," it said simply, turning and leaving with the guards. Jace stood alone with the creature, the echo of retreating boots swallowed by the distant hum of the station. He activated the containment field stabilizers and brought the pod's temperature down to suppress the twitching. Then he began his work. Blood samples. Neural scans. Pulse readings. He expected genetic damage, maybe a virus, maybe a badly designed organic interface. What he found made his stomach twist. Nanites. Aggressive, programmable nanites embedded deep in the nervous system, cloaking themselves in layers of camouflaged code. They weren't healing the host. They were rewriting it. Systematically overriding neural pathways, wiping memories, dulling motor functions. Turning a living creature into something else. The worst part? The code was familiar. Jace pulled up an ancient archive from his military records, something buried and classified from early Earth Union tech. There it was, a primitive foundation of the same nanite structure, upgraded beyond recognition, but unmistakably seeded from human prototypes. He leaned back, staring at the creature. "You're not a ship," he muttered. "You're cargo." The wolf stirred, its eyelids fluttering. One eye opened, milky and unfocused, but it locked onto Jace. It didn't growl. It didn't flinch. It just stared. There was no malice in that gaze, only confusion. Fear, maybe? Jace stepped back instinctively, then stopped himself. The creature's vitals were spiking. It was resisting the nanite override, but just barely. Its muscles twitched again, and the collar tightened briefly in response. A low whine escaped its throat. "Damn it," Jace whispered. "They didn't want me to fix you. They wanted me to finish the job." He could play dumb. Do the job, collect the credits, and pretend he never saw the override sequence embedded in the nanites. He'd seen governments hide worse. Hell, he'd helped hide worse. But that thing on the table wasn't just an asset. It was alive. And someone had gone through a hell of a lot of trouble to make sure it didn't stay that way. He leaned over and shut off the external diagnostics. If someone was monitoring him remotely, they'd just see maintenance delay logs. "You've got something they want buried," he said quietly. "And I don't like being used." He activated the quarantine suite and set the wolf inside a secure diagnostic cradle, bypassing the alien restraints and replacing them with a stasis net of his own design. If he was going to get to the bottom of this, he'd have to keep it alive. "You better not bite," Jace muttered, injecting a neural dampener. The wolf's breathing evened. Its muscles relaxed. For a moment it looked almost peaceful. Then it opened both eyes. One glowed pale violet. And it watched him. Jace didn't sleep for the next 2 cycles. The more he dug into the wolf's condition, the more the lies unraveled. The nanite activity wasn't random. It followed a structured override pattern, hijacking sensory input, dulling instinctive responses, and suppressing memory recall. Whoever designed the sequence wanted the creature functional, obedient, and completely hollow on the inside. But something in the wolf kept fighting. Jace ran a backtrace on the override loops and found inconsistencies. Glitches. Places where the code tripped over itself and reinitiated. Not natural errors. Interference. The wolf's own biological systems were trying to undo what the nanites were rewriting. That was impossible. Engineered organisms didn't resist programming. Unless they were more than tools. He accessed one of the glitched memory nodes and decrypted a fragment. A burst of static at first, then an image: children, alien, reptilian, maybe 7 of them, huddled in the ruins of a city. The wolf, still albino, but younger and unscarred, stood between them and a line of armed drones. The memory cut out just as it lunged at the nearest machine. Jace leaned back in his chair. That wasn't a combat protocol. That was choice. The wolf stirred again in its cradle, reacting to the energy spikes in its cortical region. Jace muted the alert. It wasn't aggressive, just waking up. Slowly. He approached, and it didn't flinch. Its eyes tracked him, blinking sluggishly, but it made no attempt to lash out. He reached in with a scanner, brushing its fur. No growl. Just that steady, unnerving gaze. "You remember," he said. "You're not blank." "Not yet." He set to work isolating the nanite clusters. Using an old Earth debugging algorithm, he began mapping the interface points where the artificial systems merged with the organic. He couldn't remove them, too risky. But he could weaken the control layers. The next 3 hours were spent firing micro-EM pulses into localized zones of the wolf's brain, forcing the nanites into safe mode 1 cluster at a time. After each pulse, the wolf tensed. Then, its vitals improved. Not dramatically, but enough to confirm he was making progress. By cycle's end, the creature was fully conscious and breathing evenly. Jace stepped closer, lowering the light levels. The wolf watched him but didn't move. Then, slowly, it tilted its head. The motion was precise. Intentional. "You understand me, don't you?" Jace asked. No answer. Of course not. But that gaze said more than words. It was the look of someone trapped inside their own skin, forced to play dead while the world decided their fate. Jace sat down beside the cradle. He couldn't stop thinking about the memory. The children. The drones. The wolf was never a tool. It had been used as one. His private terminal buzzed with a coded message. "Status report requested. Ship progress mandatory." He didn't reply. Instead, he began building a new neural filter, one he could integrate with the wolf's cortex. It wouldn't free it entirely, but it could delay the nanite influence longer, give the organic brain time to reassert dominance. He had the parts. An old drone processor, a neural bypass chip, a dampening matrix stolen from an old exosuit. Ugly, unreliable tech. But human tech, improvised, rugged, hard to predict. He wired it up, calibrated the voltages, and looked down at the wolf again. "I'm not doing this for you," he muttered. "I just don't like being lied to." The creature exhaled, almost like a sigh. It didn't break eye contact. He named it Ghost, without really thinking. The name fit. Pale, quiet, and haunted. Ghost didn't resist the implant. No sedatives needed. As if it understood what he was doing. As if it wanted his help. When the module synced, there was a visible change, pupil dilation, slight muscle shift. The breathing slowed again, but this time with control, not sedation. Jace sat back. The filters would only hold for so long. He needed more data, more memories, more clues to what Ghost really was. He accessed another corrupted node. This one showed a battlefield. Dozens of ghosts, same design, same coloring, same glowing veins, ripping through enemy lines. No emotion. No hesitation. But then the camera panned, and his ghost, ***1, stood still, not attacking. Watching the others with something that looked like fear. That was no accident. Jace checked the metadata. The memory was tagged with a symbol he recognized, the Valari Royal Seal. This wasn't just a soldier. This was a prototype. Maybe even the first. Which meant the king didn't just want the wolf repaired. He wanted it erased. And Jace was the last obstacle. The deeper Jace probed Ghost's memory lattice, the more disturbing the truth became. There were fragments of language, encrypted command prompts embedded in the nanite code, not to suppress instinct but to reroute identity. Ghost wasn't just being restrained, it was being rewritten at the core level. Identity subversion. Purpose replacement. Jace reran the same command tag, ***e-serif/r0****. It wasn't a military designation. It was a monarchic protocol. The wolf wasn't a rogue asset. It was once property. Royal property. He dug through Union data archives, bypassing old encryption layers, and found a classified dossier buried in Earth's first contact files. Project Crown Spike, a joint human-Valari experiment in biomechanical war beasts, initiated during the Black Gate Rebellion. Humans had provided the neural mapping interface, the Valari supplied the genetic material. The result, a living weapon with autonomous battlefield capabilities and artificial loyalty matrices. But something went wrong. Early prototypes failed. Except one. There were no technical specs, no survival data, only a cryptic termination notice signed by the Valari king himself. No formal closure. No mention of recovery. Just a location match, Sector F9. Ghost wasn't a malfunction. She was the original. The only survivor. Jace leaned back, sick to his stomach. He'd seen moral gray zones in war, but this wasn't gray. It was black ink, soaking everything it touched. He pinged an old contact, Briggs, former Earth biowarfare specialist turned whistleblower. They hadn't spoken in years. Jace sent him a packet with nanite samples, hoping the encryption held. Briggs replied within an hour. This isn't suppression code. It's a kill switch with failover AI. Your subject was meant to be a Trojan. Planetary vector. Infection and control. A cold weight settled in Jace's chest. Ghost wasn't just a war beast. She was a carrier. The nanites weren't malfunctioning, they were lying dormant. Waiting. Once deployed, they'd activate across any compatible system. Infrastructure. Organic life. Whole planets. Jace pulled up Ghost's neural scan again. Her vitals had stabilized. Her responses had become sharper. The filtering implant was doing its job. But it also meant she could feel everything now. And she knew he knew. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Ghost stood slowly, her limbs shaky but responsive. She didn't growl. Didn't flee. Just watched him with something unreadable. Maybe guilt, maybe grief. He reached for the override terminal. The kill switch was still buried in the root code, inert for now. He could trigger it remotely. Shut her down before the nanites ever activated. It would be clean. Silent. Permanent. Instead, he powered the terminal off. He wasn't here to be a weapons mechanic. A second message flashed across his comms. This one from the king's personal envoy. Unexpected delay noted. Submit status logs or face breach penalties. Coordinates logged. They were coming. And they'd bring enough firepower to retrieve the prototype intact, or vaporize it and everything nearby. Jace didn't flinch. Instead, he looked at Ghost again. "How much of you is still you?" he asked softly. She stepped forward, unsteady but deliberate, and nudged the edge of his work table with her snout. A silent answer. He knew what came next. This wasn't about repair anymore. It was about exposure. Someone had to know the truth. That the king had authorized the creation of sentient bioweapons, used them against civilian populations, and then tried to bury the only survivor under layers of infected code. Jace initiated a long-range data burst to a neutral relay station orbiting a trade moon. He included Ghost's memory data, the Project CrowdSpike archives, and the decrypted kill protocol. The packet would transmit in bursts, masked by local comm traffic. With luck, it would hit a dozen networks before the king's forces even reached the outpost. Ghost watched silently as he confirmed the send. "You're not a weapon," Jace said. "You're evidence. And in this galaxy, evidence was more dangerous than any army." The first warning came through an encrypted ping from a civilian mining beacon. An unmarked Valari cruiser had entered the sector under blackout mode, broadcasting no transponder ID, no diplomatic clearance. Jace didn't need confirmation, it was them. Not a retrieval team. Not a delegation. An execution squad. He shut down all automated systems in the hangar and diverted auxiliary power to environmental regulators. Anything that might trace their activity had to be silenced. The longer they thought he was stalling or still cooperating, the better their chances. Ghost remained silent, poised in a corner of the hangar, ears twitching with every sound, her restraint collar long since neutralized. Jace uploaded a clone of the repair logs into a decoy server, designed to simulate ongoing work. It wouldn't buy more than a few hours, but time was the only currency left. He scavenged every scrap of viable tech from storage, signal disruptors, EMP grenades, old drone casings, and began assembling defense measures. He wasn't preparing for a standoff. He was preparing for an escape. Ghost followed his movements, always at the edge of his vision, never interfering. Whatever residual programming remained wasn't guiding her anymore. Instinct had taken over, maybe even choice. When he brought her a custom-stitched neural dampener suit, something he had originally designed to contain volatile cargo, she stepped into it without resistance. Her trust wasn't blind. It was earned. Jace activated the escape route through an old mining shaft that led to the station's waste ejection tunnel. It wasn't meant for transit, but it was unregistered in newer maps. Small enough for one man and one non-human companion. The idea was simple: abandon the hangar before the Valari arrived, then board a short-range cargo sled he'd hidden in a debris cluster just outside the outpost's comm grid. Before they left, Jace hardwired a delay-triggered burst to send every classified file they had uncovered directly to 3 independent Galactic journalism nodes. Even if the Valari tried to intercept, the relay fragmentation meant most of it would get through. The king's secrets would burn their way across the stars, whether or not Jace survived. He turned to Ghost and placed a small transmitter on the neural suit's chest plate. "If they take me out there," he said, "keep running. That's your last order from me." Ghost didn't react. She simply moved beside him, her gait fluid now, focused. No hesitation. As they navigated the shaft, a low vibration trembled through the outpost walls. The cruiser had docked. They had minutes. Jace opened the final bulkhead, and the waste tunnel yawned before them, dark, low oxygen, laced with decaying metals. He activated magnetic grips on his boots, clipped a tether line to Ghost's harness, and dropped in. Gravity barely held in this part of the station, giving them glide with each push. They moved fast, every second peeling away their lead. Behind them, the hangar erupted, an ion charge detonating as the Valari breached the main gate. He heard the impact through the walls. Heard the shouts. They expected resistance. But he'd given them an empty room and decoys designed to mimic thermal activity. The final stretch of the tunnel opened into vacuum. Jace triggered the lock override, and the hatch cycled open just long enough to eject them both into space. The sled's beacon pinged once, twice, then lit up on his wrist pad. Ghost anchored herself to the hull, claws magnetized, holding him steady as they drifted toward it. They climbed aboard just as sensor alerts flared. The Valari cruiser had launched intercept drones. Jace powered up the sled and ignited the engine. No stealth, no finesse, just raw thrust. Ghost remained curled low, shielding the core stabilizer with her body. The sled bucked and lurched as they sped through debris, narrowly avoiding pursuit. Chatter erupted on unshielded channels. The Valari were calling for reinforcements, unaware that the very files they sought to suppress had already left the system. The sled wasn't fast enough to outrun the cruiser forever, but it had one advantage: an unstable wormhole ridge near the edge of the sector. Dangerous, unpredictable, but better than surrender. Jace angled the sled toward it and locked coordinates. The gravity wave hit them like a hammer. The sled twisted. Alarm screamed. Ghost braced against the hull as the engine screamed from the strain. Just before they crossed the threshold, Jace triggered the sled's last function: data core fragmentation. Every trace of their trajectory would vanish behind them. And then they were gone. The transition through the wormhole left the sled barely functional. Its systems blinked erratically, navigation offline, guidance shattered. Jace worked fast, rerouting auxiliary power to life support and shielding. They emerged in a dead zone: no charts, no comm signals, no beacons. A silent graveyard of ancient debris fields and collapsed trade routes. But silence was survival. Ghost remained motionless for hours, conserving energy, alert but calm. Whatever instincts governed her now had adjusted to the instability of their situation. No panic, no aggression, just focus. Jace located a drifting cargo husk in the distance and docked manually. The ship was gutted but structurally stable. Its core reactors were stripped, but one auxiliary generator still sputtered when patched to a bypass circuit. Enough to power internal lights, heating, and a diagnostic terminal. They had shelter. He ran a full scan of Ghost systems again. The implanted filter continued to resist the deeper nanite activation layers, but where was showing? Microscopic breaches in the code suggested an eventual override. Maybe weeks. Maybe less. But something else stood out. Her natural neural patterns had begun to shift, adapting. Where the artificial commands once dominated, new clusters were forming, uncoerced, fluid, resilient. She wasn't just resisting the override. She was rewriting it. He backed up the data and encrypted it. If anything happened to him, someone had to know that a synthetic biological hybrid could reject imposed control, that a living weapon could evolve past its programming. That meant everything. The galaxy had no use for that kind of truth, but it needed it anyway. Days passed. No signals. No patrols. They were invisible in the system's shadow. Jace scavenged parts from wreckage, patched stabilizers, and rebuilt the sled's tracking dampener. Ghost roamed the corridors of the husk ship but never wandered far. Always returning. Always watching. One night, Jace woke to a sharp metal clang. Not a threat, just Ghost dragging a fractured armor plate into the hold. She dropped it beside him, then sat back, staring. He understood immediately. Armor meant intent. Purpose. Continuation. She wasn't asking to rest. She was preparing. The data packet he transmitted before their escape had started to surface. Buried news feeds, encrypted archives, anonymous whistleblower accounts, all echoing fragments of the leaked files. Civilian protests had erupted in 2 Valari-controlled systems. The king had issued denials. His spokesperson claimed fabrication. But the files were real, and real people knew it. The truth couldn't be unsent. Jace found an old beacon in the cargo bay and reprogrammed it. Not to call for help, but to broadcast a single message to anyone listening. We survived. Project Crown Spike was real. The prototype lives. She chose not to be a weapon. So did I. The message repeated every 15 seconds, short range only, encrypted with a frequency loop that changed hourly. Anyone who found them would have to prove they weren't aligned with the Valari regime. The galaxy was vast, chaotic, and full of liars. But it was also full of outcasts. Fighters. People who remembered what it meant to stand for something that didn't serve power. They weren't hiding now. They were waiting. Jace spent the next few cycles building Ghost a new rig, lighter, faster, one that wouldn't overload her nervous system under strain. The armor plate she dragged in became the core of it. He carved a symbol into the side, half wolf, half signal wave. When he fastened it to her frame, Ghost tilted her head, ears twitching. "We're not done," he said. "You ready?" She bumped his arm once, then turned toward the bay doors. The future wasn't a grand rebellion, or a flawless plan. It was small actions, honest signals, fragments of resistance igniting in dark corners. Ghost wasn't the end of something. She was the beginning of whatever came after secrets stopped working. The king had tried to bury her beneath lies, overwrite her existence with fear and silence. Instead, she'd found someone who didn't ask for a cause, just the truth. That was enough. It always started with one survivor.